Good morning. Welcome. I hope you enjoyed reading Ephesus for the first time in one sitting yesterday. It is a powerful letter, isn't it? And perhaps there were questions that you wrote down in your little notebook as you were reading it. The first thing one has to say about Ephesians is that there is the word Ephesus to the Christians at Ephesus in the very first verse is missing from some of the oldest manuscripts. So there is some thought that maybe it wasn't actually written to the Ephesians, but I don't think we need to worry about that. If it wasn't written to the Ephesians, it would have been written rather like Galatians was to churches from a geographical area rather than a particular city. But if it was written to the Ephesians, then the immediate question one should ask is, what is the story behind the church at Ephesus? And you'll find that in Acts chapter 18, verses 24 through to chapter 19. The whole of chapter 19 is all about Paul's experiences in Ephesus. And this letter mentions a couple of times that Paul was a prisoner. So it's generally accepted that it was written when he was in his 2-year imprisonment in Rome towards the end of his life, and that he wrote to the church at Ephesus during that period. And another thing you might have noticed as you were reading through, that this letter was delivered by Tychicus or Tychicus. He's mentioned right at the end of the letter, and that makes us think. We have to think differently about how their society worked. It didn't work the way ours did. The invention of a postal system is a very modern thing. Back then, the only way you could get letters taken to other parts of the world, you would put it in the hands of a courier, and they would take it by hand. You could possibly, if you were writing to someone who lived in a port, put it on a boat in charge of the captain of the boat, and he would deliver it to the person in the port that he landed in, possibly. But most communications were carried by hand and would have taken weeks to get from Rome to Ephesus. Quite a different kind of world to the world that we expect. We put something in the post, and often the next day or the day after it arrives miles away. We have this wonderful thing called the postal system and stamps and envelopes and everything, and they didn't have any of that. This would have been written as a scroll and carried in the baggage of this man Tychicus, who, and if you want to look, maybe you want to know a bit more about him, look up where he's mentioned. He's mentioned in at least another letter, in the Corinthians letter. It seems to have been a companion of Paul at some point in his journeyings. So this lovely letter, what an impactful letter. So I wonder what your overall thought about what Ephesians was trying to do was all about. And for me, it's all about helping people understand the relationship between us as members of the church, as followers of Jesus, and the spiritual powers that exist in and above and under the earth. And how do we relate to God? Where do we fit in to this spiritual existence that Jesus is in? And what has he done for us? And how has he changed our situation? And then in chapter 2, it's all about the change, the radical change that Jesus has made in the situation of the Gentiles. That the Gentiles, who were always regarded by the Jews as being far from God, and the Jews as being God's people, the whole thing had changed now. And Jew and Gentile, the barrier dividing them had been torn down, and they could now be one people together, one church, one baptism, one building, one body. These are the illustrations of what being a member of the church is all about, which reminds us that we are linked to each other. You and I are part of the building God is building. You and I are part of the body that God has it rules, that Jesus is head of. We belong. There's a one real sense in which we are individuals following Jesus the best way we know how, but another real sense in which we are bound together as part of the body. And this thought carries forward into the third illustration he uses for what being a Christian is like. And he uses the marriage situation, that just as a man is married to a woman and they are united and joined together by God, so Jesus is the head of the church, and Jesus is like the man and the church like the woman, and they are bound together by a covenant. It's lovely, the illustrations he uses, some very precious bits here in Ephesians. And of course, all that instruction about, again, you see the pattern of the teaching first and then the practical. How do we then live in the light of what Jesus has done for us? How do Gentiles live? How do Jews live in the future? How do they live before the world, demonstrating what has changed in their personal lives? And then all about the relationships within what would have been a household, the husband and wife, the wife to the husband, the children relating to the parents, the slaves relating to the master, and the master relating to the slaves. This was a normal household in the Roman cities like Ephesus. And then going on to how God has given us protection as we live in this world from the evil that rules this world, and how we are to live. And we have this wonderful passage in Ephesians 6, the armour of God. So I'm going to invite you today to enjoy this letter again in another version from the one you read it in yesterday, and awaken alive to what God is going to say to you through this most wonderful, wonderful letter of Paul. How grateful we are that we all have Bibles. How grateful we are that we all have the internet. We can read a different version if you want to. Good to read a different version, a different translation, and see what God gives you to follow up. Maybe you want to follow up a particular word. I mean, Ephesians has this phrase, in Christ, or joined to Christ, or united to Christ, depending on the translation you have. This idea that this joining, like the bricks in a building, it's difficult to separate the bricks after they've been joined together in a building. It's difficult to separate the parts of the body without losing something very valuable in the body. And a husband and wife should not be separated because they are joined together spiritually. There's this wonderful bond that Jesus has made between us and God that is indissoluble. We are part, and we need to live up to our role, as it were, as a member of the Church of God, as part of Christ, as being in Christ. And how does it all work out in our lives? So have a great day, enjoy that, and I'll see you tomorrow. God bless. Bye.